What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. This is the channel where we sit down and cover different comic book stories from different comic book companies. Now, today's video, we're going to jump back over to Marvel Comics to continue our coverage over the Supreme Power universe, which is actually us continuing our coverage over this particular version of the Squadron Supreme. Let me explain. Because back in the 1960s, Marvel had an idea about the Avengers fighting against the Justice League. Except Marvel couldn't use those characters because DC owned those characters. And so Marvel made a bunch of characters to represent the DC characters that they couldn't use. So for example, Hyperion is Superman, Blur is Flash, Nighthawk is Batman, and the list goes on and on. So ever since the early days of Marvel Comics, we would get a bunch of stories where it is actually the Avengers fighting against the Squadron Supreme as a way to replace the idea of the Avengers fighting against the Justice League. Not really a bad idea. Except over the years, we would get different versions of the team because each team, and including the original one, they all came from different universes across Marvel's multiverse. So in the early 2000s, Marvel wanted an updated version of the team. They asked the dude, JMS, who was working on Spider-Man at the time, to rework the Squadron Supreme. So he literally started from the very beginning and redid the origins of the characters and telling the early days of those characters. He started with the series Supreme Power, but after that, him and other writers would use other series that tie into the original series, Supreme Power, to tell all the stories they wanted to tell about this version of the Squadron Supreme. And so at this point in our coverage, this is the point where we have reached the Squadron Supreme series that comes after the Supreme Power series and all of the mini-series as well. So Hyperion, Nighthawk, and Dr. Spectrum, where we see the formation of the team, meaning that they will call themselves the Squadron Supreme for the first time ever. And we have to be worried about the future because remember, back in the Hyperion miniseries, we learned that in the future, he is going to try to control the world to hopefully make it better. Some characters went into that future, but when they came back, they believed that the future was just a possibility or an alternate timeline away from this timeline. But Emil, one of the new characters, who is kind of like Hyperion's Lex Luthor, but he is super smart, that is his powers, he realized it was the future of their timeline. And so he is trying to figure out how to prevent that future from actually happening. And so getting into today's video, we actually do pick up with the opening pages of this book, reminding us what happened at the very end of Supreme Power. Because remember, when it came to the very end of Supreme Power, George Bush had to talk to the public and announce a new law. And the reason why, because the public found out that Hyperion was an alien. That was his big secret. And so when he was going around being a superhero and working for the military and the government, the world believed that he was just a regular human being who gained some powers out of nowhere. But now they know, no, this dude actually came from space. Now, on top of that, in that same story, it was also told to the public that there are other people out there who also have powers, but their powers came from a virus that came from Hyperion's spaceship. And so what George Bush announced was a new law to kind of ease the flames, because when the public found out, they were ticked off. They were angry at the government and they were angry at the military. And so what George Bush actually did was he made a new law. And when it came to this new law, he said, if you are going to be some kind of super being in America, you have to now work for the American government. And so that means if America military knows about you or they have their eye on you, but they don't know for sure that you are some kind of superpower being, you are now been recruited into the American military and you now must work for the military. Now, With all that being said, we did see that the government and the military did go around and start beginning to pick up different people that they had somewhat knew about who had some kind of abilities. Now, when it comes to General Alexander, the latest general in this series so far, he's going to make two different teams. One team is going to be out there in the public, meaning that when they're out there fighting against some super villain or saving lives, the public will see them and get the chance to know them. But the second team will be more of like Black Ops. They'll go to different areas around the world and take care of some different problems that are affecting America's chance of, making the world better. And so you'll have two teams, one Black Ops, one public. And so the first few pages, we do see the general begin to decide who is going to be on which team, starting with Hyperion. And Hyperion is going to be on the public team. And the reason why, because by this point, the public knows so much about him. And sometimes the public still looks at him as a hero. And so it makes sense to put him on the public team. Now, the next person up is Blur. Now, remember, Blur is just the Flash of this universe. Now, this is the moment you have the general had to think about what to do with Blur. Because when it came to Blur, who is Flash of this universe, he was actually a popular hero in America. And matter of fact, he was the second hero to pop up in America right after Hyperion. The thing was, he was found by two agents who wanted to use him as a way to promote different company brands. So he would go around being a hero, but he would carry on his jacket, pants, shoes, whatever, different logos of different brands from different companies as a way to promote them, but for him to make some kind of money. And so he was also as popular as Hyperion. And the question is right now what to do with him, because now he's also being forced to work for the American government. And so it seems like the general may put him on the public team like Hyperion, because just like Hyperion, the public knows so much about him. It makes sense to go ahead and put him on the public team. And so the next two up is actually Dr. Spectrum and also Amphibian. Now remember, when it comes to Dr. Spectrum, he is just the Green Lantern of this universe. But when it comes to Amphibian, she's just the Aqua person of this universe. She's kind of representing Aquaman, or honestly, Mara, Aqua Woman. Either way, though, when it comes to these two characters, you do have the military trying to decide what to do with these characters. Now, here comes the problem, though, because these two characters are madly in love with one another. And so for the general, he's very concerned about putting these characters on two different teams. But at the same time, though, he has no choice. And so when it comes to Dr. Spectrum, he will be on the Black Ops team. And the reason why, because his military background, it makes sense to go ahead and put him on the Black Ops team. Now, when it comes to Amphibian, she'll be on the public team. And the reason why, because to the general, her powers are technically pointless. And honestly, I feel like that was shots fired toward DC when it comes to Aquaman, but that's just my own personal opinion. Either way, though, right now, they're saying that because her powers are technically pointless, it'll make sense for her to be on the public team rather than the Black Ops team, because she can't read minds or anything, so what's the point of having her on the Black Ops team? Now, here is another thing to focus on right now, because in the early parts of Supreme Power, Amphibian killed some people because they were scared of her. And of course, their reaction scared her and made her think that they were trying to kill her. And so she did kill off two people. And so what the general is going to do is lie about her character and say that was not her. That was somebody else. That matter of fact, Amphibian comes from Atlantis. And because Atlantis is at the bottom of the ocean, by the time the human race is able to actually go to the bottom of the ocean, it will be years on years on years. And by that time, everybody will be gone. Either way, they're going to lie about the origin of Amphibian. Now, the next three characters that we are going to focus on is Arcania, Shape, and Emil. Now, when it comes to these three characters right here, we have to remember that we first met these characters back in the Hyperion miniseries, and that was it. And so we're still learning more about these characters as we cover Supreme Power. Now, with all that being said, when it came to the Hyperion miniseries, I honestly feel like those characters right there were the stars of that book, not Hyperion, which is sad because it was Hyperion's own miniseries, but he wasn't really the star of his own book. It was really these three characters right here. Anyways, though, when it comes to Arcania, she has the ability to warp reality on a quantum level. And what I mean by that is she can pull other things from different realities into their reality. But it has to be a reality that's next to theirs. And so she can't pull anything from a reality that's two realities away, which honestly makes things a tad bit confusing. Now, when it comes to Emil, he's just Lex Luthor. Like, when it comes to him, when he got his powers, it made him very smart, which is a great thing. But he's technically the Lex Luthor to Hyperion. And last but not least is Shape. Now, when it comes to Shape, think of Blah from the X-Men, where he is technically very durable. He can take almost any kind of hit he wants. Matter of fact, he took a punch from Hyperion, which is something most characters, really almost all other characters, cannot do. Either way, when it comes to Shape, Emil, and Arcania, the general says because these three characters have not been exposed to the public, or really the public has not been exposed to them, they'll be great for the Black Ops team. And so he says those three characters, Black Ops, let's move on. Now, the next character we are going to focus on is Edith. Now, when it comes to Edith, she is a new character to us technically, but at the same time, we actually saw her back at the very end of Supreme Power. And what I mean by that is, when it came to Edith, we saw a bunch of different characters after George Bush had announced to the world that if you're going to have powers in America, you're going to work for the American government, for the American military. And so while he was giving that speech, we saw a set of different characters over like 3 or 4 pages. And by this point in our coverage, we've seen most of those people we saw at the very end of Supreme Power, like Arcania, Shape, and Emil. But Edith, she was one of the characters we saw at the very end of Supreme Power who was very worried about the idea of she has powers and now she has to be forced to work for the American government and military. This is going to begin our chance to actually learn about the character more. But here's the thing. When it comes to when it comes to Edith, she has super strength. Now, the question is, though, how strong is she actually? Is she strong as Hyperion? Is she strong as Zarda? We honestly do not know. But we do know that something happened in the past that makes her get angry very easily. And so anytime someone does her wrong, she wants to beat down on that person. But the question is, what happened to her in the past? But we do learn that she does have super strength. Now, the next character is Nighthawk, and this is literally 1 page because right now what you have the government trying to do is put together a team of superheroes, heroes with powers. They don't want anybody who don't have powers at all. And so when it comes to Nighthawk, you have the general remind us that Nighthawk is just Batman. He has no powers. His parents were killed off by some racist person, and so now he kills off people who attack the black community. And that's really it. And he's in Chicago. That's literally it for Nighthawk. And so you have the general say, there's no reason for us to go out of our way to recruit this character into our fold. Now, the last 3 characters we have to talk about is Thomas Thompson, where apparently his code name for right now, because the nurse gave him that name, is Tom Thumb, and he's technically just the Ant-Man on the team. Then you have Nuke, and of course his name should give it away when it comes to his powers. It's just that he's able to release a high amount of radiation, and he does have super strength and flight ability as well. And then the last one is Zarda. Now remember, Zarda is technically the Wonder Woman of this team. Either way right now, we don't know much about her because remember, when we did learn her origin, we found out that her origin is actually not correct. But the question is right now, what is her true origin story? But either way, when it comes to Zarda as well, she killed someone and she took that person's identity. And so right now, the general is having a hard time believing that Zarda is who she's saying she is. Either way, because all three characters are kind of new, they all got pushed on the Black Ops team as well. Now, that is your Squadron Supreme team. All those different characters, but right now on two different teams. Except that idea goes right out the window. And the reason why, because of Hyperion. Now remember, Hyperion also went into the future and he met his future self. And his future self gave him a plan like, hey, if you want to make sure this earth gets better, you have to take control, complete control. And so his future self gave him an idea to how to actually pull that game plan off. And so right now you have Hyperion going over to the reporter known as Jason Scott. Now remember, Jason Scott was the person who told the world about Hyperion being an alien. Now it wasn't Hyperion who told him that story. It was the military who told Jason to write that story because the military was trying to hurt Hyperion emotionally. Now with that being said, this right now is Hyperion getting back towards the military by coming to Jason and telling Jason, I have a story for you. And the story I have for you is what the American military is trying to do. They're trying to form two different teams, one for the public to see and one being a Black Ops team that would take care of different problems that America has across the world. And so this is Hyperion hoping that Jason will write the story and tell the public, which he actually will do. But the reason why Hyperion is doing that is kind of like the first step in his plan to take over the world, to have complete control over the world. But as soon as Jason writes that story and it gets out to the public, you have the general say, okay, there goes my plan of two different teams because now the world knows about what we were going to do. And so with that story being out there, now when it comes to the general and the government and the military, they have to play a tad bit of cover up because now with that story being public, America's enemies now know, okay, America now has a group of super beings that they were actually going to use against us. That right there is a huge problem. And so you have George Bush do another press conference. Now, when it comes to this press conference, this is really him telling the world, okay, there's not going to be two teams at all. Matter of fact, is going to be only one team. And so the general changed his mind and grabbed all the different characters that he was trying to put on different teams and put them on one team. And you have George Bush say, this is your Squadron Supreme. And so getting into the second chapter of the book, this really begins the process of us kind of learning about the idea that there are other people out there who were also infected by the virus that came from Hyperion's ship. Because remember, when it comes to most of the other characters besides Hyperion, where they got their powers came from the virus that had left the ship of Hyperion. And so now we're going to see that that virus did not just affect the people in North America. Because if you follow all my videos so far, you will believe, yes, the virus only affected North America. But now we're going to find out that is not actually true. But before we can actually do that, the opening pages of the second chapter is really more of the team doing paperwork. And really, this paperwork is to say, hey, making sure that you are who you say you are. But on top of that, we want to make sure you sign your contracts as well to show that you are stuck with the military, that you're going to work for only the military. And that is it. You are not going to do anything else unless the military tells you to actually do it. And so right now, it's kind of sealing their fates, saying, hey, you're stuck here forever. Until you actually die, you are part of the American military, the American government. But by day 4 of them now working for the American military, well, that is the moment you do have Alexander, the general, actually call in everybody for their first mission. Now, when it comes to their first mission, they have to go to Africa because apparently there is this leader, John Putu, who's apparently a leader of a certain area in Africa who's using his powers for evil. And he's causing a lot of problems for America and other countries around the world who are also part of the United Nations. And so right now, the UN wants to send in the Squadron Supreme to handle this particular problem. And matter of fact, they have been cleared by the UN to go out to Africa or this area in Africa to take down this certain kind of leader. Now, when it comes to John Putu, apparently he does have a crazy set of powers, which honestly makes him a very good threat right here. Because when it comes to his powers, yes, he's very durable. He's able to take a lot of different things. But you also have Alexander tell us when it comes to John Putu, apparently he's also very smart. But on top of that, he's able to control your mind by talking to you. So technically means that as long as he's nearby you, he could talk into your ears and he finds a way to actually control you. And so those are his 3 powers that he actually has, which does make him a very powerful threat. But either way, you do have Alexander tell the Squadron Supreme, okay, you got your mission. Now it's time for you guys to go to Africa or that area in Africa and take down this particular person. And so before they're able to actually go on their next mission, well, that is the moment you do have Alexander actually pull Zarda to the side. Now, the reason why he does this because Alexander realized that something is up with Zarda, which honestly there is. Because let's not forget, guys, she did kill someone off at the very end of Supreme Power, and she took that person's secret identity. Not secret, but their identity. She had been pretending to be that person for a certain time period. And so right now, when it comes to Alexander, he's starting to realize that Zarda is not who she says she is. That yes, she may say that she's so-and-so's name, but she's not really that person. Now, you do have Alexander kind of use a way to figure out who she actually is by asking her for a code name, because everybody else on the team has a code name except her. And so what he actually does is says, hey, so we and my friends have been sitting down trying to figure out what to call you when you are out in the field. How do you like Power Princess or Princess Power? And of course, she hates both names. And so she says, just call me Zarda. Now, with that being said, that is technically her real name, Zarda, for the time being, until we actually learn her true origin. But either way, it's her saying, yes, you may call me Zarda, and that is it. And so with her telling the general that, he does get an idea that, okay, so I don't believe that she is who she says she is, the person's name that she's using right now when she's out in the public. I think her real name is Zarda. And then I'm going to do my research with that name to learn more about her. Now, when it comes to their first mission, they actually do get there to Africa. They do get to the location they have to be at to find their target. But when they actually get to their location in Africa, well, that is the moment we come to find out that the leader of the team when they're in the field is actually not Hyperion, it's Dr. Spectrum. Now, this makes sense because when it comes to Dr. Spectrum, he is the only person on the entire team that does have some military background. Not some, a lot. And so it would make sense for him to be the leader of this team on this military mission, except Hyperion. And so with that being said, when they do arrive, you do have the characters begin the process of doing what they were assigned to do to make sure that this mission actually comes out great and not a complete disaster. Now, here comes the problem though, because while you have the heroes out there actually doing their job and taking down the different targets they need to take down so they can get to their main target, you have Blur talk to Hyperion about how he feels. And really, he does this for only one page, but honestly, it's very, very important because it does two things. And what Blur really wants to talk about to Hyperion, why he's so upset, is because he hates the idea of seeing people fight against one another for no actual good reason. And what he says is that when it comes to the different tribes in Africa, he sees the tribes. He does see where they're different when it comes to their ideas and their beliefs. But at the same time, how do you know who belongs to who? Because they're both black. Both tribes are black. Now, when it comes to Hyperion, he says, well, yeah, look at Europe. A lot of countries out there are dominant Europeans who are Caucasian, very light-skinned white color. And so with that, when those countries fight against each other as well, you have no idea who belongs to who when it comes to a regular person. But the reason why you have these tribes, these countries fighting against one another is because of beliefs, religion, or just because of what you believe life should actually be about. And when those opinions get involved in your conversation with someone, sometimes those conversations can turn really bad and lead to a fight. And so when it comes to these tribes, these countries, or just people alone, that's the reason why you have so much fighting in the world, because we cannot accept the idea of someone else's opinion. But getting back over to the mission, this is where things begin to fall apart for our heroes. And what I mean by that is you do have Dr. Spectrum say, okay, it's time for us to go ahead and take down our target, Batu. I'm going to go find him and take him down. Now, while he flies over there to take down Batu, well, the problem is, though, he realized he has not heard from his girlfriend, Amphibian. And so he begins to worry about her. And so when he flies over to their target, Batu, well, he finds Hyperion and Amphibian standing right next to Batu, where it seems like they now work for him, which honestly they do. And the reason why, because remember, he has mind control abilities. And so he was able to take over the minds of Hyperion and Amphibian as well. Now, because Dr. Spectrum had walked into that room, and because he's a tad bit too slow, just like that, bam, Batu was able to control Dr. Spectrum as well. And he tells all three characters, okay, here's your assignment. Go after your friends and take them out now. And really, with Hyperion by himself, that's a big threat. But when you throw in Dr. Spectrum, that's a huge threat. Now, Amphibian, she's also a threat, but not as big as Hyperion and Dr. Spectrum. But either way, now our three heroes are going to fight against their own team because Batu now controls them. And so when it comes to the third chapter of this book, it's really more just the Squadron Supreme fighting against each other, because we have Dr. Spectrum, Hyperion, and Amphibian right now working for Batu, while you have the rest of the Squadron team trying to fight against him, which honestly is not an easy task, because like I said earlier, when it came to Hyperion, that right there alone is a powerful threat. But when it comes to Dr. Spectrum, my gosh, that threat right there is literally red alert, probably higher than red alert. And so right now you do have the other members of the Squadron Supreme trying their best to actually take down Hyperion, but to also take down Dr. Spectrum. Now, those two characters right there, they do cause a lot of problems. Now, Zarda is actually able to help Dr. Spectrum, but to also help Hyperion. And what she actually does is she goes to Dr. Spectrum first. And the reason why, because Dr. Spectrum powers comes from the crystal that is embedded in his hand. Because remember, when it came to his powers, it comes from his crystal, but that crystal came from Hyperion's spaceship. But on top of that, the crystal has a mind of its own. And so when it comes to Dr. Spectrum's body, there's two different personalities, the crystal, but also Joseph Ledger. But when it comes to the crystal, it does hold Hyperion's mission. Why was he brought here to Earth? But also the crystal knows the true origin of Zarda as well, except we still have no idea what her origin actually is. But you have Zarda go over to Dr. Spectrum and really to the crystal and say, hey, I need you to take over your host, to bring him back to us, because right now he's not in control. But once you do that, I need you to go and handle Hyperion as well. And so you do have the crystal take over Joseph Ledger's body, which means Dr. Spectrum is somewhat back under control. But then you have Dr. Spectrum go use his powers on Hyperion to bring Hyperion back under control. Now, when it comes to Amphibian, it was done a tad bit differently, because what happened was Emil, the smartest person on the team, he found a way to actually take down every single person on the team, kind of how like Batman does in Tower of Babel. I almost said Battle of Tower of Babel. But in that storyline, Batman figured out a way to take out each member of the Justice League. And so when it comes to Emil, he found a way to take out every single member of the Squadron Supreme. And Amphibian was the easiest one to figure out. And so he does take her out a tad bit, but not really a tad bit. I mean, what he does to her could possibly kill her, but she is saved by the rest of the Squadron Supreme. But because Emil technically did hurt Amphibian, it does tick off Dr. Spectrum. And so he wants to kill off Emil, but now realizing that she was also under Batu control like he was as well with Hyperion. And so right when you have Dr. Spectrum getting ready to kill off Emil, well, that is the moment you have Blur reappear, because he was in the first part of the battle, but not the second part. And the reason why? Because he found some friends. And really, we should not call them friends, but they're here to help the Squadron team take out Batu. Now, when it comes to Blur friends, a matter of fact, they're not really friends, but on top of that, we have no idea what their names actually are. But when it comes to Blur and his friends, it actually does continue the idea that when it came to Hyperion spaceship, when he crashed here on Earth, that virus did not just affect the people in North America or just in America, it affected people around the world. Now, at first, with Batu, it seemed like he was the only person in Africa, in the entire continent, who may have powers, but we come to find out that is not true, because these characters right here who are right now standing next to Blur, they also have powers as well. Now, here's the thing. They are very upset with the Squadron Supreme, because they're kind of like, look around. Look at what you actually did. Supposedly, you came here to help us because the UN told you to go out here, help us, because we were unable to actually take him down. But here comes the problem, though. Y'all made things even worse. Look around the area. You guys have caused so much damage in this area. How can we actually sit here right now and say, oh yeah, you guys did a good job helping out? No. You guys ran in head first with no actual plan. Your minds got taken over. You fought against yourselves, and this area took a lot more damage than you guys actually expected. But of course, it happened because you were not truly prepared. But at the same time, Africa, or this area in Africa, did not ask for your help. It was America trying to be America. But here's the catch, though. This is actually America's fault. The reason why Batu is in charge because America helped him get in charge. And on top of that, America gave Batu all the weapons he needed to actually take over this area. Because when it comes to America and other countries around the world, when they begin to kind of mess with these small countries and their small wars and give those small countries a bunch of weapons, they actually make a profit out of those wars between those small countries around the world. And so right now, it's this guy saying, just leave. Because honestly, we have the powers to actually take care of him. We were just waiting for the right time. And so we do see 2 of the 5 people that came with Blur go and find Batu, and they literally rip him apart. He's dead just like that. But it proves that right now there's other people out there with powers as well, not just in America, but all over Africa, possibly Asia, also Europe. We don't know yet. And really, the story ends there because you do have our heroes go back to America because, one, they had no choice, but because they got defeated. They feel defeated because they were defeated. And they realize that this is not a proper team, that this is a team that needs more proper training. This is a team that needs to trust one another. This team needs more control. And that right there is a huge thing to say because right now it's Hyperion realizing, okay, I had a full team of heroes and we were easily stopped by one guy who had powers. One guy. There was like 6, 7 of us and we still failed. That right there is a problem. And so this is going to push Hyperion even more to say, I need to take over. I need to have control over the earth. But this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.